Hello, selectors, and welcome back to the Lifeburst Podcast.
Welcome to the Lifeburst Podcast. The Wixoss podcast where we talk about all the Wixoss things and nothing but the Wixoss things.
That's true. Only Wixoss today.
Only Wixoss.
So what we're going to
Who
be talking
are
about...
you?
Hi, I'm Andrew.
I'm Tiffany. We're your hosts.
God, we nail this intro every time. So, hey, our topic today is sleeper cards in Wixoss.
Cards. And we don't mean sleepies.
Yeah, we don't mean sleepies. We just mean cards that are being slept on.
Yeah, that we've been playing them and testing them, and we think that they're pretty good additions to certain decks. Of course, you can feel free to disagree with us, or agree with us in the comment section down below. If you think that there's a better option, of course, we'd love to know that as well, so we can play test that.
Yeah, and some of these things are from what we've play tested, and also what we have seen some of our friends are playing, as well as some people online are playing. Speaking of our friends have played and we went to our monthly our local community comes together basically once a month for a big Wixoss tournament where we do the ceremony. I don't know what you call it, ceremonies.
It's a Wixoss party.
The party.
Isn't that what that was called?
Yes, I think so. But it was at one point we were doing like a party every week, so you know.
Oh yeah, no, that was crazy.
Yeah, now it's cemented into one a month. That like is.
Yeah, we all kind of have like regular jobs and like family life stuff, so like this is the best we could do.
Right.
For those of you out there that are adults and have like your regular day-to-day boring adult lives, or maybe it's not so boring, I don't know.
Right.
Let me know. You know how it is, how you kind of just have like one day a week that you can devote to certain things, if not one day a month.
Yeah.
So that's what we do. And it was really fun because a lot of people came out.
We had some people come out from out of state
and we got to meet them for the first time, and it was honestly just a really good time.
Super cool. Yeah, our first place was a Tama discard deck, which makes sense. It's actually really good in the meta.
Was brutal.
I decided to go crazy and play, I know everyone's like, he's going to say Bang, but I didn't. I played Musica Cosmos this time.
How did that go out?
Good. I really should have played Entwined Supremacy instead of To the Top. Go to the Top. But it worked out well enough. Like, the main deck and the Elreg deck had enough power in it that got me second place. And then a surprising, me even, and everyone, we had third place was a Urith Demons deck.
Ooh.
I know, Demons Tribal.
Yeah.
Represent. I
took the latest iteration of our Umer Death and Taxes, which we may do an updated podcast on a little bit later. And I only got to play twice because I ended up getting 2 buys, which getting a buy is always a mixed bag because it does count as a win in like Swiss style tournaments. But at the same time, like, you don't get to play, and I was trying to play.
Yeah, it was a pretty diverse pool, though. We had aggro, we had mid range, we had
a lot
tempo.
of different types of players too, which is good. Because I know that sometimes when you hang out with the same people all the time, or in your in your locals or in your card store, sometimes everyone will want to play the same sort of style of deck. And I feel like in our locals, at least, like, we have a very diverse crew.
Yeah.
Like, we have people that just want to play their favorites, and then we have people that are like really good at aggro but are trying out mid-range, or some people are like just control players but like they'll switch up their centers. So I feel like we really got a good sense of sort of like the little microcosm of our local meta in this ceremony, or party, whatever it is, just tournament.
It was a good one, though. It was a good one.
It was great.
Moving right along into our sleeper cards.
Yeah.
Not to be confused with sleepies.
Not sleepies, but cards that people are probably sleeping on right now.
Yeah, I divide these slides pretty much into like Elrig's deck spells and then each color Signy, because Signy is the bulk of your decks that you make. So let's talk about this first one, which is Yuka.
I love this assist line. I just love it. Since we have put it in the Umer Death and Taxes, it has been it is like a puzzle piece fit. And I personally, the reason why I like this line, one, it's like new and exciting. Who doesn't love that? But it's cheap.
Yeah,
I
it
mean,
is.
look at the grow cost. 0 and 0. And what's more is that Yuka Yuka Dojon? Yuka Yuka Dojon, the level 2 Lurig Assist, is not only free to grow, but it has main phase and attack phase timing. So you could just slap that sucker down, not even worrying about what is in your enter zone. And it even has the possibility of being played multiple times if your opponent doesn't pay for it.
I think if you were playing this in the right deck, and I want to express, right, these are cards that you slept on. It doesn't necessarily mean they're staples, right? They're
yes.
they're not sleeper hits. That's the big difference, right? The why I'm saying cards you slept on, not cards that are sleeper hits, right? Sleeper hits rear their ugly heads later and been like, you guys should have been playing me as a 4-of for like a year now.
Yes. We might make a podcast about some of those like cards we've been wrong about.
Yeah. And sleep. So the big thing is that cards that have been slept on, these are maybe more niche, right? And that's okay. That they're, I guess I say niche all the time, but niche is the right way to pronounce it. Niche. They're more niche. And you can't run this Yuka line in every deck. But
no.
if you were hyper aggroing and also enter starving, this Yuka is amazing.
Yeah, the Yuka lines are really awesome if you have any sort of like taxes build.
Yeah.
In my opinion, and you want to run white, I would look into the Yuka lines.
And the Yuka itself is basically, it reads, it goes back into your Elrig deck unless the opponent pays 1 or enter
or
pays
discards.
1 enter. Discards 1. So in the decks that we're talking about where this is his niche, it basically doesn't have that rider. It's always going back into your Elrig deck.
Or it's not.
It's almost always going back into your Elrig deck.
If you are playing that. Sorry.
Yes,
okay, I got
yes.
it.
Because it is a small tax, but that's not the point. It's the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yes. Yeah, this is something that it would be like one of the last things you want to do, but it is a line of defense, but it's something that, like, if you time this correctly, you're going to be able to grow her multiple times and just say, like, nope, in a very typical white way of being like, no, I don't think so.
It is worth noting that if you put this in your Elrig deck, you are basically damning yourself to always having a limit of 7. Right, because it pops back into your Elrig deck. So you're never going to put out a defense that is a 3-3-2. It's basically always going to be 3-3-1. But in this type of deck, that's fine because your 1 is generally speaking minimum. So you're fine. You're fine.
Well, in the deck that we built, yeah, like in the deck that we built in particular, our level 1s are always something that you can play in the late game. And that goes for all level 1s. I just want to remind everybody, but we chose level 1s in that deck particularly that you can play late, knowing that that your limit was going to be diminished with this Yuka line.
Right. And so the next one we should talk about too, it kind of goes in that deck that we are saying it's sort of the same niche, which is Can't Stop Pretty.
Can't Stop Pretty.
Which you've played quite a bit at this point now.
Yes.
And what's your opinions on it?
I do actually kind of like it. I like that if when you grow your center to a level 3, I do like that you can just play this and setting up like sort of a line of defense. So I actually don't play Can't Stop Pretty right when I grow my level 3. I actually like wait a turn because what I'm doing is I'm really just setting it up for my like turn 4 to 5 defense step against my opponent because this one also has main phase and attack phase timing.
Yes.
So you're almost like, I kind of want to think of it like it's a different kind of assist. Because your assists always have like main phase timing, but you're giving your Lurig an ability to have a defense on your opponent's attack step, which is the only time that I would use this.
Yes.
Obviously. And then the Exceed 4 cost, that's like nothing. Like, I think we've talked about how Exceed, while it is a cost, it's technically free, especially that late in the game.
Yeah, the only cost with Can't Stop Pretty really is you really shouldn't be running Thrilling and Miracle Draw in the same deck, right? Because you're not gonna be you're using your Exceed for Can't Stop Pretty.
Yeah. And and the tax of unless your opponent discards 3 cards. Even if your opponent does decide to play that, that is a large amount of cards, because remember, your maximum hand size is 6, so you're still taking at least half of their hand away.
Yeah. And so Can't Stop Pretty can't be a sleeper card because it literally came out like 2 weeks ago. But
Why is it in this list then?
well, I put it in for a reason because it's also with Peeping Future. So a lot of people would prefer to play Can't Stop Pretty and Summer Lives Blue together as a package. And I think they're probably correct in that. Like, I think that is probably the default option. But I do want to point out Peeping Future here as well, as a very viable option that you could be choosing to do instead. So Peeping Future is sort of like a defense mechanism. Not only does it discard something out of your opponent's hand, which is cool for blue or blue.
And you get to pick out what it is. So if you see a guard, you know exactly what you're doing.
It's pretty good for blue and blue adjacent decks. Tama decks kind of like it. Red decks could potentially use this to strip a guard. But the other thing that it would be good for is that it stops an L-Rig from upping. Now you got to remember the timing on it is up comes before enter charging, and it has a pretty serious cost of 3 tax in order for it to up.
Yeah.
Meaning you can kind of keep that L-Rig down, right? Which is going to stop once per turns from Tama. It's going to stop some team stuff. It's pretty good in that respect. Now, the reason why I put Can't Stop Pretty in here and Peeping Future is because if you were to attach like Yuka, Can't Stop Pretty, and Peeping, and maybe right where we cross, so I guess we like Machina line, right? Like it's you're probably using the Machina line.
What is the most likely to be the favorite assist? Machina.
If you were to put all these pieces together, right? This is still technically worse than a 3-stop for an aggro deck, right? A 3-stop will stop 3 attacks, right? These all together stops 4 to 5 attacks, like 4 to 5 damage, which is a lot for 4 cards to cover in comparison to what a single card does for a 3-stop.
Especially when you're looking at the cost, and altogether those 4 cards cost 2 blue.
Right. And
so you're stopping how much for 2 blue?
Yeah, plus probably the Machina.
Plus the Machina, yeah.
So but the point is that I'm trying to make here is that I think decks have to choose between 3 different types of L-Rig deck defense setup, right? And that's basically that you either are choosing the 3-stop lane, where you stop the ability to close your, like where you stop ability of aggro to attack, right? Or you're choosing to be the aggro deck, and you could have something like an Anj assist line, and you're giving up some of your defense, and you really only have a little bit of a defense now. Or you should do this, and Autumn called this pinpoint defense system, right?
Shouts out to you, Autumn.
And I like that it's called, like, it's more like a pinpoint stoppage, which is, when stopping 4 damage is better. It's better when that 4 damage is delivered over the course of like 4 different turns, and you have the ability to stop them individually. And that's when the pinpoint defense is way better than the 3-stop. We're pretty lazy and we default to a 3-stop, but the pinpoint might be better if your meta is leaning more Tama heavy, which I think a lot of metas are now.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. There's a very strong white presence, and more likely than not, it's going to be center Tama.
Yeah, so getting off my soapbox talking about Tama now, I want to do the opposite of talking about like control and discard, and talk about how Hanio just punches things so hard.
I mean, yes.
Okay,
I know that I feel like some people have also been running... Oh, no. That's Yuzuki. People have been favoring Yuzuki as a red center lately.
Yes.
But Hanio is a really great red assist.
Yeah.
It almost reminds me of oh my goodness, what's the original red center? You know who I'm talking about. From No Limit.
Hirana?
Oh god, I'm so sorry, everybody. It kind of reminds me of the same sort of vibe that like the Hirana red deck has, but you got that feeling in an assist. So the first one, it's vanish target signature in your opponent's field with power 5,000 or less and enter charge 1. So kind of bringing back that like old-timey flavor of red giving us enter charge.
Yes.
And then we've also got draw 2 cards or enter charge 1. Target level 3 Signy on your field gains double crush until the end of turn. And you said that this was very much like go to the top.
No, not exactly. What I do think is that Hanio is like here's my main thing.
Okay.
I want my level ones to do two things nowadays. I want them to open a lane and do something else, right? Machina has set the standard for that. Open a lane, get back a card, right? And Hanio does that amazingly. She opens a lane. Yeah, sure, it's a smaller lane, right? Sometimes you see a Baphomet on the other side and you're like, well, that stinks.
Mm-hmm.
But you get to Enter Charge 1, and that Enter Charge matters a lot in a lot of decks. It's a resource, right?
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is Hanio does have a level 1 or level 2 that costs 1 Enter and vanishes a Signy with attack phase timing. It's very average. It's not as good as, for example, Machina is, because Machina can very cheaply do that and also some utility. Hanio doesn't do that really, because asking you, I think, to discard 3 cards to vanish a second Signy, I feel like that's a lot to ask. But what it does do really well is that it's a very good level 1 and a pretty okay level 2. The reason why we put this down as the level 2 of choice here is because it's really maximizing what Hanio can do. Hanio's unique in the fact that it is one of the only L-rigs that gives double crush on its level 2. And the Enter Charge and Draw 2 help a lot to different decks. Are you facing an Enter Burn deck? Cool, the Enter Charge 2 probably helps you get back the Enter that you lost.
Are you facing a discard deck?
You get the Draw 2 then to back that up as well. You just, all the requirement is that you are able to open a lane. And if you are able to open a lane, that extra damage, Double Crush in my opinion is more valuable than Assassin is. I can understand why Assassin might be better in certain standards, but Double Crush represents more damage, and aggro decks and most decks are looking for extra damage, not just being able to get in 1 damage safely.
Yes. It's a slightly different approach.
Yeah.
Let's move on to our spells.
Totally.
We've got Get Remember and Trouble. So what is your opinion on Get Remember?
So Get Remember is kind of funny because it can literally get Remember, but it's not actually its job. Like every time I read Get Remember, I'm like, oh yeah, draw 1, and if the top 3 has a Remember, you can draw that as well, and it's draw 2 for 1 at that point, which has an abysmal rate of finding stuff. And then I reread it again, and I'm like, oh no, it's if it Remembers on your field. And it's like, how often is Remember on the field for these white decks? And the answer is like, pretty often.
I mean, it would be the preferred field state for a white deck running mostly white cards.
Right, that or Exia, and you have to choose if you're an Exia deck or a Remember deck, and that's fine. You can make those choices. But if you are the Remember deck, if you are running 4 Remembers, you very likely have other ways to have Remember on your field, right? Like Hanios don't find it, but I mean, like, you know, there's white selection is what I was getting at.
Yeah.
And Get Remember at that point is a 1 Enter, draw 2 cards spell. And that's Miracle Draw.
You can also like look at the top 3. So not only are you drawing 2 cards, but you're also looking through the first top bit of your deck as well, which is something that like a Ket would do, which is they'll look at the top 3 and then put any number of them at the bottom or the top.
Yeah, the scry.
Which is what this does, but then this allows you to draw 2 on top of that, and it's only and it only costs you 1.
And we talk about a staple, and a staple is Miracle Draw. And this does what Miracle Draw does, pretty similarly, but it doesn't have the Exceed cost.
Right.
Which means that you can use your Exceed for something else if you needed to. I'm just saying, it's a slept card. I think it's actually better than what people give it credit for. The other one that I think is better than people give it credit for is Trouble.
This one's been in the meta a while. Why did you add this one to the list?
It's just funny because it's like, sometimes you see it in the Japanese meta pop up every now and then, but like I never really see it in the American meta, which is crazy to me. Because the Trouble in America, the Trouble in America.
No. This is our podcast. That's not our podcast.
The cool thing with Trouble is it's got basically a Folklore life burst, right?
That's true.
And that's anti aggro tech.
Yes.
And its ability, right, if you play it as a card, is draw 3 cards, which generally speaking helps you against the control or mid-range decks.
Yes.
So this card weirdly straddles both. And it's like, hey, if you're struggling against aggro, but you also are struggling against combo or control, I can kind of help you. It does both.
That's true. I mean, this one is pretty dang good for that life burst. The Focalore life burst, when it pops off at the right time, is devastating
Yes.
for the opponent.
And
So
watching...
having a spell that's going to help to replenish your hand, even if it's a little bit on the expensive side,
It is on the expensive side.
with this life burst, might be something that you want to consider. It depends on the deck that you want to build, but this could be really beneficial to you, especially in the meta that we're in right now, where it's either heavy discard or heavy white aggro.
Right. And I would also say that it is worth it to cast it once when someone's really been focusing on discarding you and they got you down to 0 and they think you got you. Then you draw this, you play it, and you draw 3. You just watching them die inside is worth it.
It's worth it.
Moving into white. Now we gotta speed through white a little bit because it has more cards than I care to admit.
We got a lot of white support in this meta, as many of you know. And these are some of the cards apart from some of the new staples that have come out.
So Yuki is overperforming.
Yuki Memoria Code Maze.
Yeah, so Yuki has 2 abilities. It can lane switch, and it can put something into an open lane, right? You can move something into a different lane. Or it can invalidate abilities on a card. Mm-hmm. That is really good, right? Like, I was playing Cosmos yesterday, and someone played Remember, and I was like, oh, well, my deck now just artificially costs 1 million more because I have nothing but action abilities. And I kept thinking, man, if I just had Yuki, I could just shut down
shut this off,
and then go through and attack. Or the other thing is Yuki can shut down Baphomets and then allow me to easily kill it with my Hanio. Yes. There's a lot of reasons why Yuki's good. Yuki can put Brunos into the wrong lane, and then you can leave them there stranded. Right, and that's something you can do.
I didn't think of that either.
Yeah, that's something that you can do for if you're not an aggro deck. If you're the opposite, if you're a control deck, there's a ton of different things where you want to invalidate an ability. Right, you might invalidate a Diabride, so that way you can then Enterburn. You can do stuff to your heart's delight. Like it's something that's good. It's just invalidating abilities on cards. The other thing to talk about is, like, with Yuki, Aya is a pretty good deck, and Aya has a nasty combo with Yuki.
Oh, it's nasty.
Which is where you flip something over, right? Now creating an open lane and a card that is flipped over, and then you put the one of the cards into the open lane that has the flipped over card. Mm-hmm. And now if they want that card back, doesn't matter. It goes to their trash.
Yeah.
If they try to do it. So
you guys recently voted on a poll that you would like to see Yuzuki versus Aya. So please make sure you subscribe for that upcoming match.
Yeah.
Eventually.
So moving to the other level, I put the level 3s here. There's so many good options in white right now. That's probably why there's sleeper options, is because there's just a ton to choose from. And I'm just going to do this lightning round real quick. But
lightning round.
Penlight, the games are going longer, and they really are starting to matter. Your Elrig attacks are really starting to matter to help close games out, right? Mm-hmm. That is like Tama's dream is to have a longer game backed with discard and a little bit of removal, and just swing 1,000,000 times with her ability, right? And Penlight's like, yeah, not gonna happen, because it also gets Shadow to cover itself, so it's like it's tough to deal with. So Penlight is a really good option in the meta that people aren't using right now. Guy Bolg.
I think it's pronounced Gay Bolg.
Cool. This is a card I was wrong about, and I want to openly admit this on the podcast. I first saw this, and when I did my review, don't go back and watch it and tease me.
Or do.
I said, I don't think this card's it's got wrong removal timing. It's not proactive, blah, blah, blah. I didn't realize that this is my fault. I didn't realize this is a white-blue card. This is a multicolored card. You don't know it. It's not actually a multicolored card.
Explain yourself.
But it is. If you were a blue discard deck, then what Blog does is it does discard the Signy that's on the field, right? So if they're trying to out you by drawing a couple extra cards and throwing them down on the field, Blog makes sure that you clean up afterwards while still enter starving them, right? Mm-hmm. So it's support to discard. And that's why Blog is really, really good, and a lot of people are currently running it as like a 1 of or a none of in their decks, and that's wrong. They should be running it as a 2 of or a 3 of. This is probably the closest thing we have to a sleeper hit in the meta right now.
Yep.
And so there goes TCG's prices, as I said that, because people are now buying them out.
Whoopsie daisy. Honestly, though, I have been playing Gay Bulk a lot more. We've thrown it into a couple of our decks that we've played, and it is an interesting level 3 in my opinion. This is my opinion. It's an interesting level 3 because not only does it give your Larig an extra ability, which is very helpful for any kind of removal that you don't want to go into the enter zone. But it also is technically a free card draw.
Yep.
If you're just looking for filling out your field with defense.
Correct.
It's sneaky.
It does everything you're trying to do in a discard mid-range deck. Koella is the next one. Koella is just kind of like the better Archwing, I think. It doesn't have Shadow.
Hot take.
I don't think it's hot. I don't think Archwing's that great. Anymore. Excuse me, anymore.
Okay.
But turning off abilities is good. It's better against green decks than it is against other decks, which I guess it's also pretty okay against blue decks. But it's worth thinking about, right? Like I said with Yuki, turning off abilities is good. I had someone yesterday play Exia Ant Nest on me, and I looked at the Ant Nest and I was just like, this sucks. It just sucks. Like, I mean, I'll struggle through this, but it sucks.
Yeah.
And then the other one is Yumi. It's a new card.
Yukime.
It's a new card, so it's not a sleeper, but I think people are sleeping on it. I think it's just
fun.
It's just a better Chandelier, in my opinion.
Yeah, yes, I do find this very similar to Chandelier because when it vanishes the Signy in front of it, it goes to the trash instead of the enter zone. Also, like, the fun, like, declare a number and flip it and see if you can draw a card or whatever, and if you're, you know, whatever. That's fun. It does have a coin cost, which I've been using the coin cost in my decks personally.
It's great in Aya.
Oh my god. But it also has a life burst that's the same as the Koella one. And basically this is just like, see your Signy, goes to the trash.
Yeah.
So like, I like it when you have a card that's got redundant text and life burst, because then it's kind of like, no matter where this is, it does a job for me.
Yeah, Chandelier wanted to be in a Spells Matter deck, but also the Spells Matter deck didn't necessarily care about enter starving, so it didn't quite work out with its life burst, redundancy between its life burst and its actual ability. Yukimi does that. It just does that. It's just like, hey, I'm gonna trash things, and then if you flip me on a life burst, I'm also gonna trash
stuff. I also will say that if you have two of these out in the field at the same time, it's a real good time.
Yeah, the secret tech, Tiffany's been playing it more fairly, right? Like, I've been playing Aya, and with the coin cost, you're like, I wonder if you've got a 2 on top. Oh, look at that. You do, right? Because it's basically cheating.
Basically.
Tiffany's been calling it more fairly. She's got to actually look at the trash and try to figure out what the number is going to be.
Yeah.
But she's also playing Umir, and Umir has a lane switching thing. So you put this in front of the Hastalic, and then you're like, resolve your Hastalic. Oh, it doesn't get vanished. It goes to the trash. Sad.
Yep.
Move it into a different lane. Now attack and trash this other thing. So there's reasons as to, again, it's more niche.
Yes.
But it's good.
But also, if you have two of these on your field and you don't have the coin cost, you can guess the first time and be wrong, and then guess the second time and be right.
You're like, who knew?
I got a lot of auto triggers in my bucket. All right, let's move on. What do we got? We got some level... Oh, no. We got reds.
Wide variety. Just red stuff.
Yeah, just some red stuffs. Amethyst. Ooh.
It's weird because I feel like most red cards aren't slept on. Probably because... Red's thing is like, enter, burn, punch them. And so it's just kind of easy to see, like, if something's like, I'm enter burning more, punching harder. You know, like, I got double crush. You know, you're like, cool, this is a good red card. And it's, like, easier to evaluate good red cards. So I pulled some cards here that are harder to evaluate, but I think they are good. And Amethyst is the first one, which was something that we learned on an interview when we were talking about one of the first ceremonies.
Yes. I think that this is a good card because, well, it like I said, it might not be a staple, but it will fit into your deck if, again, if you're trying to cycle your hand. Like, this is good for setting up your next turn or trying to find a guard.
Yes. And it's worth mentioning that red decks generally struggle with trying to find guards, which is one of the reasons why I even push more for Umir Clear recently.
Yes.
Is because it's basically pretending like it has really cheap guard recursion, because it can freeze an Elrig, and that's like stopping. It's like they struggle to find guards, so all right, they don't have to find a guard. Umir Clear will do that. And
no one expects Umir Clear.
Amethyst does that as well, right? Like Amethyst digs you. And in the decks that you're playing Amethyst, you don't normally have dig. So it's worth shouting out there. One of the decks that it's also pretty good in that people are not kind of looking at is the red black decks, because it's using both part of it. The draw is important because you're searching with red and black, and they don't normally get such great they get great recursion, but they don't get great card filtering. But the discard's important because you can discard something that you might be using later or meet, that 10 cards in your trash minimum that you're looking to hit sometimes. Altar is something that I can talk about because I played Cosmos the other day, and it's a 3 of in that deck right now. I'm trying to figure out a way to make it a 4 of. If you can guarantee that you're always hitting all the level 3s required for Altar, that card is a all-star.
Level 1.
Right, yeah, level 1, sorry.
But yeah, the Cosmos deck is a lot of fun. I have also played it, and just
free vanish is so
good. The fact that you can like pretty much guarantee that to go off is a lot of fun.
And it's an enter ability, right? And the best part of that is, what are you playing in your Cosmos deck? You're playing 4 of Bernices, and you're playing 4 Hanios, which all have a life burst that says put something on the field, and then this has an enter effect that can interrupt your opponent's turn. Yes. And you got to remember, like, one of the top cards right now is Monomin. And Monomin is a 3,000.
Yep.
So there you go.
Yeah, I know that because this is a 5, it's saying vanish 3,000 or less, which won't hit everything on the field. But the fact that when this enters, if you're running it in the Cosmos deck setup, it's a guarantee. We love it.
Yeah, it's great.
Plus, you get to look at the top 3 cards of your deck.
It's actually kind of true, is you can kind of actually stack your deck a little bit with Cosmos. Like, you end up being in a scenario where you're like, I have 7 cards left in my deck, and I know what every single one of them is.
Yeah.
Coco.
Yeah, let's talk about this one. This one's fun.
Coco's a wacky one.
Look at the art.
It does something that still no other card in Wixoss does right now. It cheapens your Elrig grows.
That's crazy.
I know, it's nuts.
You can have like a nice, expensive, crazy Lorig assist with this.
Yeah, I mean, like, so let's say...
Or if you're in trouble, no, never mind. The timing's wrong on that.
Yes.
Don't listen to me.
The like, we say Akino Bye Bye is a pretty good card, and it costs 2 to bounce and 2 to bring a guard back. And really, that's a little overcosted nowadays for what we're trying to do. And you're like, I just wish that my Akino cost 1 to bounce, and then 2 to bring back a guard's fine, right? This does that.
Yes.
It's also really good in Musica, because Musica replays its assists main phase timing, and they can't kill your Coco main phase. So you just replay your assists for free. It's excellent, and it vanishes things, which pairs super nicely with Musica's negative effect, because Musica does negative 5,000 when an Elrig grows on your side. And oh, look at that, this kills at 8,000 or below. What's 5 plus 8? It's 13. This kills
that will
13
pretty much cover everything. Yeah. And I do think it's cool because it's reducing the grow cost by 1, but it's basically saying like, hey, this thing that you would have spent to grow, you can spend it to vanish something instead.
Yeah, something we've talked about offline, Tiffany and I, just driving around in the car talking about Wixoss, doing our own podcast.
Being nerds.
Is you always got to look for things that don't say once per turn in Wixoss, because they're just ripe to be broken if the right thing comes along.
Yes.
Right? And music is pretty close, because it bounces that Elrig thing, getting you multiple uses of this ability. But like if for example, I don't know, we ever get to a point where like we have level 3 assists or something, right? This is going to be super good, because you're going to be like, I'm going to grow to level 2. Now I'm going to grow to level 3, you know? And,
Oops, everything on your field
everything's
is gone.
cheaper. Yeah, you know.
For sure. All right, let's move into our blues. What do we have?
There's quite a few here.
Got some cute ones.
There's some really good utility Signy here. The first one's Neon Tetra.
Yeah, this one's been in the meta for a while. It's enter, freeze target Signy in your opponent's field.
Yeah.
Why does that matter?
It's just a good card. Freezing things occasionally is just good. You don't need to build a deck around it. I'm just saying, targeting something and surgically being like, okay, I'm enter starving you, that stays on the field, but it doesn't do anything for you anymore.
Right.
Or you can be like basically forcing your opponent to get rid of it, right? Like, I can't deal with your H2O, but I'm freezing
But I'm freezing it.
which means that if you want to use that lane this turn, you'll deal with your own H2O for me.
That is true. I have found, personally as a player, if someone freezes a card on my field, I'm much more likely to enter that one and put something else out on the field.
Yeah, and some stuff is difficult to get rid of. It might be a 13k, 15k, might have some kind of ability where it's like if the opponent vanishes this, you bring it back. You know, this is just a good way to be like, all right, look, you deal with this on your own. You can choose to take the tempo loss if you want, right?
Right.
And that's really when Neon Tetra's at its best. And it's a level 1, which means it can get brought back by Machina assist line. And so it ends up just being kind of a good utility creature that you can bring back occasionally, like once or twice. So it's worth maybe a slot as a 1 or 2 in your deck.
Primoria, Code Maze. This card is so annoying.
It is really annoying.
It's annoying. It says at the end of your opponent's turn, freeze target Signy on your opponent's field, and then another auto, when this Signy is vanished, down target Signy on your opponent's field and freeze it. So this is like a catch-22 in a card. At the end of your opponent's turn, freeze target Signy on your opponent's field. So basically, if this is left on the field, something gets frozen.
Yeah.
But if you vanish from the field, something gets vanished.
This is annoying for an aggro deck that can't
Or it
necessarily
gets downed and frozen.
Can't necessarily deal with it right away. And it's also a skill check, because if they don't read the card quickly, they'll be like, oh, well, that's one of my lanes gone now, or something.
Skill check.
But what it really is actually pretty good against is these mid-range decks. Like, the turns are going a little longer, and just constantly being like, I'm downing and freezing something, I'm downing and freezing something, can really drag on the opponent as the game goes on. Especially if they don't deal with it, because there's a lot of enter starve decks in the meta now.
Yes. Now we've got Georgia Natural Element.
Yeah.
This is GA Natural Element. It's a vanilla, like, level 1. What are we doing with this card?
Okay, so it has a life burst that is either fantastic or awful. Your choice.
Why is it your choice? Drawing 2 cards and having your opponent discard a card seems great.
Yeah, it's absolutely backbreaking against various decks that are trying to discard you out of the world.
Right, because it's just drawing you 2 cards.
And it makes you win the tempo race too, because it's just not like, if you are also the discard deck, right, and they hit this, their hand size is, let's say their hand size was 5 and yours is currently 4 or is currently 2, right? They hit this. Your hand size is now 4 and their hand size is now 4. You guys are at parity. So out of nowhere, you went from actively losing because the opponent was doing something to you, to now we're on an even keel, and it was nothing.
Like, basically negated what they
right.
did.
It's even worse if they're at 3 and you're at like 1 card, right? Because now you're at 3 cards and they're at 1, meaning that you're winning the race now. And on your turn, it's so much easier to be like, hey, I'm gonna discard you 1. I'm not wasting resources. You go down to 0. You don't have a guard in hand anymore. And they might have set you up so that way you're discarding. I have this guard in my hand now, but they have a Bruno. When Bruno attacks, they're gonna get rid of that card, but they're not attacked with it yet or whatever. Maybe it's a Tamago. Tamago makes you discard at random, right? and then they hit this, you draw, you now have 3 cards in your hand, you have that buffer to protect the guard. That's 1 damage that you're now winning the race.
Right.
So it's one of these wacky cards that does nothing on your board, but can swing games still in the right matchup, and you have to be against basically if you're like a control or mid-range versus control or mid-range, this is a really good card to consider.
Gotcha. All right, moving on to CZ Natural Element. When I look at this card, is it bad that I think about how there's Pikachu, but then there's also Pichu?
It's basically...
Which is the non-evolved version of Pikachu.
Yeah, this is basically the Pichu of the ZR.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so this one connects directly to Sacronium, Natural Element Queen. This one says when the Signy attacks, your opponent draws a card and discards a card at random. That just feels so rude.
Yeah, the discard at random really matters because it just messes with your opponent's hand.
Yeah, not only you're basically cycling their hand for them, which is so frustrating. And it also says that if you have the Natural Element Queen on the field, then you can pay 1 and give something negative 4,000 power until end of turn.
Which pairs nicely with ZR. ZR, that makes the negative 8,000 turn into negative 12,000, which can kill most things.
Yes.
And the 4,000 is just good on its own, right? So if you do a negative 8,000 kill something, negative 4,000 kill a 3,000, right? Monomin, cough, cough.
Man, you really have it out for Monomin.
It's such a good card. But it's a staple right now, right? It's even winning out Hakat for me, I know, which feels sacrilegious because we love Hakat.
We do like Hakat.
Moving on, I'm gonna lightning round these ones.
Lightning them.
Because again, it's just kind of unfair how many good utility white creatures or white Signy are, and how many good utility blue Signies there are.
Wow, is that why we're seeing so much white and blue in the meta?
Probably.
Justice for green.
Don't look at the next slide yet, then. Tiffany.
All right, I won't look. I'll have a genuine reaction. Let's lightning these. Let's go.
Okay, so we got Sui.
Nope,
Swai.
it's Swy now.
Sui. So Sui's got a really simple text, which is when it enters, you discard up to 2 and draw 2, right? And this is just really good. It complements Hakat and some of these other decks where you're trying to just get some guards that you would naturally be able to get to. And it's not a huge blue requirement to do it. Maybe you're just trying to hit a little bit of blue so you can Madoka Clap and have that as a splash on your deck. This kind of help you get there. And the two cards that you can get also go in the trash. Now that kind of matters because that helps with black decks, and often a lot of black decks want to be paired with blue because blue wants the black damage output. So it ends up being a pretty good one. I don't ever think that this is ever going to be a 4 of in your deck unless we see a really all-in trash deck start emerging. But it just kind of helps you get a little bit extra growth. And level 1 Signy are becoming more and more important, not just because of Machina's level 1 ability, where you can bring back a level 1 to your hand.
But remember,
yeah, the fields mostly, your endgame fields that you're mostly seeing are 3-3-1.
yes.
And 1s are super impactful early in the game to set you up to win, as well as in the late game to ensure that you can keep going.
Not to mention, the way that we build our decks, and we've talked about this before, we tend to have a majority level 1s in our deck. And that's because you can use them at any point in the game.
Yeah.
So having these stronger level 1s come out, or level 1s that are very, very good in particular decks, as I've mentioned earlier in the podcast, is really great.
Brunhilde is a level 3 that seems like it should be in an angel deck, but really it's more at home in discard decks. It when it attacks, forces your opponent to discard a card, and just sometimes
at random,
which is and at random is better, by the way, than not at random. But it just matters to have a critical mass of these. I'm doing it on attack, so you can't Xenocluster, or you have Xenoclustered and I'm stripping the Xenoclustered cards out. And it also gives some filtering because you've got some other angels maybe kicking around that also help filter. Exia is an angel, Hakat is an angel, Hanio is an angel. This is all the same. Those decks that want to run Brunhilde as maybe a 1 of or a 2 of are likely to use those as well. And then its life burst allows you to do what? More discarding.
Yes.
And
I mean, you can vanish. That's like if you have the hand size and that's something that you want to do. But I think more likely than not, people will be choosing option number 2, which is your opponent discards 2 cards or discards a card at random.
yes.
Always trying to get that guard out of people's hands.
Exactly. And then the last one is, what's this flower called again?
A hyacinth.
A hyacinth. So one is definitely a sleeper. Blue struggles a lot with Enter, and I have really come around on Enter Charge and thinking Enter Charge is pretty fantastic. It is.
Who knew having Enter is a good thing?
I know. It's just it's easy to get cards in your hand these days and harder to get Enter these days. Mm-hmm. So I've sort of like swapped my stance on that, where I was like, I'd rather blow my Enter and get than discard cards, you know.
Yes.
Now I'm like, I'd rather hold on to Enter and discard cards, because a lot of the times I won't have cards necessarily in my hand anyways, because I'll be up against a discard deck. Mm-hmm. And one of the best defenses against a discard deck is just not have cards in hand. Like,
sure, let's call that a defense.
Well, it's a way to deal with it, right? Like,
I mean, it kind of like it. I mean, you basically look at your opponent and you're like, yeah, I know you're trying to be fancy, but like you've fancied me out. Like I don't.
Random drain's way worse when it's not discarding a card. When it's just cycling for one Enter.
I suppose so.
And the blue decks that struggle with Enter may be trying to get something expensive out, like for example a Madoka Break, which probably could be on here as well, as a card. This is a good way to Enter Charge, right? You're discarding a card, and then you get to Enter Charge 1. Sometimes you like having that card in the trash, but outside of that, you're basically giving up one card in your hand for an Enter at the end of the turn, but you get an Enter.
Right.
And that can help you grow, your assist grows.
I mean, basically, I guess the way that you could look at that is you are, well, I guess not. Never mind. Don't listen to me. I'm still trying to figure out how to play this card properly. But yes, more Enter Charging, especially for blue, is really great right now. Against a discard deck, I feel like blue versus blue discard is really difficult. Like if you're both discard decks.
Yeah.
So having the Enter Charge in your blue deck is actually really important, because when you're discarding, none of those cards are going onto the field or in your Enter zone. They're just going straight to the trash. And this is a way to kind of mitigate that.
There are some times where you're the blue deck and you're drawing extra cards and you're going to have to discard down at end of turn, or you're up against the mono white aggro deck, which is bouncing cards back into your hand. And since you're the blue deck, you already have a ton of cards in your hand, and you're going to discard it anyways due to limit.
Yeah.
So you discard instead of discarding to limit, why not discard to Enter Charge?
There you go. All right, let's move on.
How many are in green? It's 2 cards. 2 cards in green.
You're breaking my heart. Wait, that's really it?
That's it. Yeah, that's all.
Okay.
Continuing my rant about Enter being really good, Sheeran has kind of gone up in my evaluation. If I'm playing a green deck that's splashing green, I'm almost trying to fit 4 of these in the deck now, which is crazy that I'm like, yeah, I'm playing a black-blue deck that also splashes green, and I want 4 Sheeran. Like, you know, like that is something to be said, because we don't say that very often about green. It's like, no, this green card is a 4 of. Mm-hmm. Even with other good cards in the deck, I want this one as a 4 of. It's just Enter Charge 1 is, someone recently said it's like rituals in Magic the Gathering, which are basically temporary mana that you can use to break open normal turn economy, right? Enter economy. Mm-hmm. And being able to just get an extra Enter is insane. Like, especially if you're one of these blue decks that's drawing all these extra cards, and you're gonna have to discard to your card hand size at the end of turn anyways. Just get an Enter out of it, then sacrifice this. Sure, whatever.
Oh, there you go. All right, and then we've got green Lucabor type Ein. Now, why is this one in our sleeper agent?
It's a really stupid reason.
Let's see. Put this Signy on your field into its owner's trash. Target Signy on your field gets plus 5,000 until end of turn. If it's a Venom Signy, gets plus 10,000 power until end of turn. And also as a life burst, Enter Charge 1. Next time you take damage from a Signy this turn, instead you do not take damage. Are you just putting this in here for the Enter Charge?
No, for the life burst, basically. It's a level 1 that has a life burst that's pretty okay.
Yeah.
And green has a distinct lack of that. You look, like, I swear, open up the card list right now, type in level 1 and look for the life bursts, and you're going to see things like pay 2 to vanish something. or it hits 7,000 power or more, you know, and in those scenarios, it's like just not super great.
Yep.
And this is an okay life burst that also is a level 1 with a pretty okay ability.
Yes, but this is also another one that, I mean, I don't think tribal venom is a thing, but if you can give something +5 or +10 in the late game,
Yeah.
because this is a level 1, you can still fit this within your limit on the field,
Yeah.
then that's great.
Give your 12,000 power double crush. It still is gonna die to Madoka, or sorry, to Machina.
Yeah.
Make that 12,000 a 17k.
Or
It's
a
not
22k.
Yeah, it's not dying. It's not dying.
It's not going anywhere.
Like that's the point. Is even though it might be card disadvantage to play this and immediately sack it to give something 5k, that 5k getting over a certain hump matters a bit.
Yes.
Like, one, it matters a bit in green decks because Lancer's a thing. But outside of that, being able to stop red vanish effects that are X and below, right? You got to remember, you might be doing this just to ensure that it might feel like a waste to throw this on a 5,000 power Signy when you're attacking, but because it turns it into 10,000 power, and what does that really matter? It's not a huge boost. It doesn't die to the negative 8,000 life bursts.
There you go.
And that might matter.
And that might matter, depending on what deck you want to put this in, for sure. That's why it's on the list. Well, let's move on from that brief intermission of green. We've got some black cards. We've got Brutus, Dehumidifier, Typhoon. What's going on with these guys?
So Brutus is a mill 4 when it attacks. Mill 4 sometimes is the difference between killing someone and not killing someone.
Are you talking about because by the time that you're playing this, you might be looking to deck somebody out?
Yeah, but also because smart players, and we trust everyone who's listening to this is a smart player. So you
guys are smart.
You guys
you're listening to the Life Burst podcast.
You guys already know what the deal is. When you're looking at your deck and you're counting things and you're like, okay, I can draw here, I can draw 3 cards. What does that put me at? And you might count your deck for that. And you might be like, if I draw 3 cards here, it puts me at 10 cards. Nope, that's a terrible idea. I'm gonna get Falaris out of this game if I do that. Okay, so I won't do that. That leaves me at 13. I'm fine. If they Falaris me, I still have 2 cards to draw, and on my turn, and I won't lose a damage. Right. And that matters then to have that -4. If you get that -4 early on, that is no longer an option.
Well, also, like, milling your opponent 4 cards, that can be a lot, especially if you hit a guard in that mill.
Yeah. And also the opposite of that is Falaris is basically Lancer, if we want to make it fancy Lancer, because it can't deal damage to the opponent because it has to vanish a Signy in order to do it, to do its effect. This doesn't. It can attack through an open lane and still do the mill, which means that if, for example, you milled them down to 3, let's say, with the Falaris, and they thought they were safe now,
then you whip this out.
On the following turn. You can deal extra damage because this will mill and refresh them before the damage. And if, for example, they were at 1 life cloth, they're dead now.
Yes.
Because this was the attack through an open lane, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Okay. Now we've got Dehumidifier. As long as there's a spell in the trash, the Signy gets plus 4,000 power. That, I feel like, is going to happen.
Stupidly easy.
That's very easy.
With how much
it's
random
almost
drains?
as easy as a Baphomet.
Yeah, you go random drain or a miracle draw. Boom, you're there.
Yeah.
Thrilling. Boom, you're there.
Or, just one of the other 2 spells that we mentioned earlier, like a Remember,
right?
Or getting Remember or Trouble or whatever.
I've seen people even just be like, yeah, I'm running Furin Slash for the Life Burst and White Enter. I don't ever play it, but hey, guess what White Enter turns into? Turns into cards in your trash.
Yeah.
But it's
That's true. Like, you don't even have to play a spell this turn. It just has to exist in your trash pile.
And its Life Burst is good, right? Like, its Life Burst is put a level 2 or less Signy from your trash into your hand or on the field.
Without guard, yeah.
Yeah, which is good. I love those Life Bursts.
Yes. All right, now we've got Typhon, Doomed Evil. Sorry, I said Typhoon earlier. It's Typhon. Typhon. As long as the Signy is awakened, it gets plus 7,000 power. Exceed 3, awaken the Signy.
Yep.
Okay.
And then it's got an okay life burst. We don't need to go into it. It's just discard something to give negative 12,000, which is an okay life burst.
Yeah. I mean, anytime we see an exceed cost, I feel like it's basically free.
Yes.
Depending on when you play this.
And this one's more free because it's specifically exceed 3.
Mm.
You know how much you can exceed in a game? You can exceed 7, which is your 4 and your 3.
Very good. Well, I like that because there's been a lot of decks that's kind of like you can only exceed one thing, so choose wisely.
Yep.
But with this, you can exceed 2 things.
Right. And sometimes
So like you could do this and can't stop pretty.
Yeah. Sometimes a 15k is not only huge defensively, but it kills a remember.
Oh.
You know,
that's true.
Like these are things to consider. You know, it might be a 1-of in your deck, and guess what? It's black, which means that you can recur it pretty easily.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The last one is what?
Oh, the weird one. Modem Code Heart. This is level 3 black Signy. It says at the beginning of your attack phase, remove up to 2 spells in your trash from the game. Target Signy on your opponent's field gets minus 3,000 power for each spell to remove this way until end of turn. So you can take out 1 spell and give something negative 3,000. You can take out 2 spell and give something negative 6,000. This is pretty great because by the time that you're playing Modem, it's a level 3 Signy, so you will have cards in your trash. Especially if you're playing black, you're much more likely to have like self-mill effects. Yeah. So this is almost a guarantee that you're going to be able to play this. The first auto ability. The second auto ability is once a turn, when you use a spell, put the top 2 cards of your deck or your opponent's deck into the trash. This might not always go off. I don't know very many people that run a lot of spells in their deck. But if and when it does, you're almost always going to be milling your opponent for 2.
Yeah, this is like, so the aggro decks probably use, if they're a black aggro deck, they're probably using Dark Energy. If you're not an aggro deck and you're a controller or mid-range deck, you're probably using this instead because it basically fulfills the same function. It kills something for free, right? And this has a little bit of incidental mill, and those control and mid-range decks might care about that a bit.
Yes, it is pretty helpful because it's at the beginning of the attack phase. This first ability.
Yeah.
So you can clear spots on your opponent's field before they get to their defense step, which I kind of prefer, to be honest. Like, I know that like they can grow no matter what you do, but you can still clear their field without having to be in the attack phase.
Right.
So you're getting rid of a Signy before you have to vanish a Signy.
Right. And that's kind of why it gets an edge. Like, I think a lot of people will default into like Flauris, Anna Mirage, and Tama as like black level 3s of choice. They're all very good level 3s, but you might consider, like I'd consider, like, all right, am I a deck that really cares about life burst blowback, or am I a deck that cares about free removal in the late game? If I'm a deck that cares about free removal in the late game, instead of that, I'll play this over Tama, and Tama's a much more powerful card, generally speaking. So, you know, this is I think this is an option.
It's an option. It should be interesting. If you want to toss it in your deck and try it out, let us know how it goes.
And with that, we're at the end.
We're at the end. You guys made it. Thank you for listening to our list of sleeper hits. Of course, you are free to agree or disagree. Please let us know in the comment section down below. Also, subscribe if you want to hear more podcasts like this, or if you want to listen to some of our upcoming podcasts. The best way to do so is to subscribe. And as always, may you always flip a life burst.
Bye, everybody.
See you next time.